Okay, great. So if you're at home or you're watching this later or you just came in, definitely have a blanket and maybe like a block or a water bottle or something you can put your hand on that's about this height. And then I do want to try to use either a pillow, a bolster, or you could take a couple different blankets, roll them up together so that they kind of create about a 4 to 6 inch height that you could lay on in a moment. So from here, we're going to start standing today. If that's okay with everybody. Finding Samasthiti, equal standing pose. With the feet under the hips, toes point forward. See if you can get those toes and knees to be in line. You could maybe pick up the toes, stretch them out, place them back down. You might want to sort of really make it a little bit more exaggerated, just sort of taking the weight from the toes to the heels until you can find sort of a space that is even between the toes and the heels. And then push the feet down, lift the chest up, let the tailbone be heavy, and let the arms be long. Can everybody hear me at home right now? Give me like a thumbs up if you can. Okay, just making sure. Just making sure. All right, push the feet down, lift the head, lift the chest up, and then close the eyes if that feels comfortable. Just taking a few deep breaths in and out through the nose if possible. So if it's not possible today for any reason, just breathe normally. And if it's not possible to close the eyes, that's okay. Just let the gaze sort of soften on something so that's not, you're not staring at it. Your eyelids are just sort of droopy, but you can still see. Taking a few breaths to become really aware of what the natural breath feels like today. So that in many ways, you're giving yourself, your brain a little break, right? Your mind gets the time to focus on something that it wasn't focusing on before. But then you also get the chance to sort of see what normal is for you in your breathing so that you can keep checking back in with it throughout class and just noticing if it's changed greatly, which might be a good sign that you can back off. When you're at home and most of you have your cameras turned off, so if you need to back off, you back off. There's absolutely no shame in that. There's no reason not to. And in fact, one of the things I'm hoping that we're all learning from doing some of these at-home practices is that maybe sometimes we are pushing ourselves a little bit farther than we maybe should when we're in person because of that thing that always happens to all of us, the ego. We hold ourselves to a different standard when there's others around us. Even if they're not judging, even if they're not noticing, we sort of construct this idea that they might be. So when you're at home and you're alone, the ego has nothing to prove to anyone else. And you can use that as a really good time to get to know yourself a little bit better. And really get to know what your stopping points are, what your range of motion is, getting to know what motivates you, what doesn't motivate you. And so nothing is right or wrong or bad or good. It just is, and then it's just you learning. And that's the intention I'm making for class today, but if you have any other intentions and you'd like to set them now, you can. If you have any intentions for a person, a place, a situation in need, intentions that you would like to become action, now is the time to remind yourself of those. And then as you're ready, you can bring your hands down. If you brought them up, you can open your eyes, push your feet down, put a slight little bend into the knees so that we're not totally locking the legs out. And on an inhale, just bring the arms straight up towards the ceiling, fingertips towards the ceiling. We're gonna reach through the fingertips, reaching up. Try and get the sideways super long. If the shoulders are up next to your ears for right now, that's okay. And then just exhale, just press the arms down. So really try to think about swimming, slowly pressing the arms down, like you're gliding through water. Adding on from there, inhale, we're gonna lift the arms up. Palms face each other, reach up toward the ceiling, reach through the fingertips, get long in the sideways. And then exhale, bring the arms down. Today we're going to come into a little bit more of a traditional Urdhva Hastasana, upward facing hands. We're going to inhale, take the arms out to the side. Palms face forward. I'm coming out to the side like this so you can see it. We're going to reach forward and try to touch our pinkies together first, like this. And then bring the rest of your palm and fingers together. So your arms are in front of you. We're taking this structure, and that sort of helps get our shoulders in the right spot, and we're going to lift that up towards the ceiling. Now, that said, your head's going to be behind your arms. This may not happen for you. Your arms might be here. That's okay. We're trying to push the pinkies together first, and then just let the thumbs and forefingers come together just lightly. So really think about getting the space between the shoulder blades. And if that means your arms stop here, that's fine. Maybe you're able to reach them up towards the ceiling, but what we don't want to happen is this big arch in the back. So we're going to push our feet down, pull our lower ribs and hips towards each other. That might mean the fingers have to come farther forward. And we're looking up to our thumbs, not by dropping our head back, but by pulling the chin in and just taking our gaze upward. And then exhale, you're just going to bring the arms back down. Inhale, you're going to bring the arms out to a T. Reach forward with the pinkies first, then closing the palms. Inhale, reaching upward. This time, exhale, we're going to let go and fold forward. You can put a super deep bend into the knees. Let the head hang heavy. Let the belly find the thighs so that the back can round. You might even add a little bit of movement, bending one knee and the other, just so you can sway a little side to side. Maybe it feels good to grab opposite elbows. That can sometimes bring the weight a little bit more forward, which makes you feel like you're a little longer. And then release the arms, and we're just going to simply roll up to standing. See if you can roll through your vertebra. If you have any slip disc issues, you might just want to flat back and stand all the way up. And then rest back into Samasthiti. Inhale the arms out to T. Reach forward, then up. Urdhva Hastasana, upward facing hands. So you see the difference between my chin is slightly tucked in and I'm looking up to the ceiling versus letting my head flop back. I can't breathe as easily there. And then exhale, fold forward. Adding on a little bit, letting ourselves slump, and then bringing the hands to the shin or elbows to knees, pulling the chest forward, halfway lift. So you're looking down to the ground and thinking about getting the top of your head forward. Take that length you just created, exhale, fold in. And then inhale, you have the chance to either roll up vertebra by vertebra or flat back and arms bring you all the way up to standing. You don't have to Urdhva Hastasana, just the arms come up. Exhaling, standing tall. Inhale, take the arms out and forward, then up. Exhaling, folding forward. Inhale, halfway lift, pull the chest forward. Exhale, fold. And inhale, make your way up to standing, flat back or rolling, whatever feels best to you today. Exhaling, pressing the arms down as they came up. Inhaling, arms forward and up. So it's almost like you're scooping up the hands towards the sky. And then exhale, folding forward. Some people in some practices talk about scooping up their love and offering it up to whatever you think is in the sky. Exhale, fold, and inhale, stand. To be honest, that's a little woo-woo for me. But if you like it, you can do it. Inhaling, reaching the arms forward, reaching up. So you're really creating space in your shoulders so that your arms have more space to move, and then exhale, fold. Inhale, halfway lift, moving the spine like we normally do. Exhale, fold, and then stand all the way up. And exhale, press the arms down. Shake it out a little bit. Hopefully your shoulders are feeling maybe a little bit more open than even just our normal up and down, or maybe just feeling a little bit something. They're feeling something, I'm sure. So we're gonna stand up nice and tall and grab your block or a water bottle, just something that is sturdy and tall so that you can put some weight onto it. So it can be like a metal water bottle or just something that's sturdy that we can put some weight into that's at least 4 inches high, probably. And then we'll stand up nice and tall, take the block or whatever, I'm gonna say block, but you know that you can have whatever you need. And we're gonna step our right foot back, and the block's gonna be in the right hand. So from here, we're gonna turn our left toes inward, slight bend in the knee, bend your right knee, and turn the right toes out. So you're facing the back of your mat probably now, or your toes are facing the back of the mat. And then from there, push your right big toe mound down to bring your right leg towards straight. So you can see I'm kind of leaning over to the right a little bit. Bring your weight back a little bit to the left so that your left foot has some weight. You can think about pushing that left ankle, that left heel down. From there, inhale your arms to T with the block or whatever you have in your right hand. So that adds a little bit of weight there. We're going to take our right hip, it's going to send as far back as it can. When we do that, we're going to send our right arm as far out as we can, keeping it somewhat parallel to the ground. So we can't go any farther. Then we just drop the right hand down. The right hand comes right under the right shoulder. Left hand can stay on the left hip, or it can go up toward the ceiling. Triangle pose. Utthita Trikonasana. Push the right hand down. Pull the legs towards each other. Pull the crown of the head forward and lift up through the left fingertips. So we're getting long through the collarbone. Pull the crown of the head forward with the top of the head forward. You can look down if your neck is bothering you. But really, really think about pulling yourself forward, and that might get some space out of the neck. One thing to look for in Utthita Trikonasana a lot of times is we're either really far back or we might be like really far forward. If your right hand is under your right shoulder and your hips are in line with your shoulders, then you're doing it, you know, in an alignment that probably is safest for you. Some of us might need to squeeze our hips together a little bit and push them forward slightly so that our hips and head can be somewhat in line. And then we're going to look down. Today we're going to take this block, or take the left hand down to the left hip. Taking the block, we're going to flip it down to that second setting. So it's half as high. If you have like a water bottle or something, just step it forward to your foot. You don't need to flip it down, but it's kind of in line with your foot. We're going to bend into the right knee, and we're going to push the right knee into the right arm. And then we're going to push the right arm back into the right knee and push that left foot down. Your left hand can either stay on your hip or it comes down toward the ground, past your left ear, and then you're turning up to look toward the ceiling. If that doesn't feel good on your neck, you can just look down. But what we're trying to do is that pinky side of our arm, that same thing we were just doing in Urdhva Hastasana, the pinky side of the arm comes toward the ground. It should be a very similar feeling shape. The shoulder is turned out, it's wide across the back. A little internal rotation there. Oh, no, that's external rotation, sorry. Your pinky is facing down to the ground, and we're going to try to pull that left arm away from our body. So we're getting a big stretch on the left side. To come out of this, you're going to push your feet down. You're grabbing whatever your left hand is on, or your right hand is on. Use your left arm to pull you up, push your feet down. You can straighten that right leg if you'd like, coming up to standing. Then slightly into the right knee so the right toes can face forward. Then slightly in the left knee so that you can turn your left toes out. If you need to wiggle walk it a little bit, you can. So you're in a still pretty wide stance. We're just going to do all of that on the other side. Push your left big toe mound down to bring your left leg towards straight. What you're doing there is keeping your leg from locking out, keeping it strong, and keeping some internal rotation in the leg. Right leg, push down into the ground. You might even need to lean back a little bit. Take the block or whatever you have, left hand, and go straight out. From here, send the left hip back, send the left arm way out. And then when you're like, oh, I can't go any farther, that's just when the left arm drops, and it drops wherever the left hand is under the left arm. That could be closer to your thigh, that may be farther up. If you can't reach the block or whatever you have, just put your hand on your leg, that's fine too. Right hand can go on your hip, and if it does, push it down. So you're getting this lengthening through the right side of the body. Or maybe the right arm comes up towards the ceiling. And if that happens, you're gonna reach up through the fingertips. So regardless, the hand's just not resting somewhere. That arm is active. And then pull the crown of your head forward, push your feet down, and then you lengthen through that right arm. It might feel good to look up toward the thumbs, toward the right thumb. You can close one eye and the other if that's the case. And make sure that you can see your thumb with both eyes. And if it's way too far back, which might be causing some stress on your shoulders, bring it forward a little, or vice versa. We're really trying to get these bones stacked. Exhale, look down, take your right hand to your hip, flip the block down to the medium setting, or if you have something that's not gonna flip like that, just walk it forward to your foot, then into the left knee. My stance might be a little long, so I'm gonna wiggle walk my right foot in a little, push your left knee into your left arm back into the left knee, and then pull the crown of the head forward. Again, you can keep your hand on your hip, or you could take your right arm down to the ground, and then circle sweep it so that it gets next to your ear, pinky side down toward the ground so the shoulders open, and then you can look up toward the ceiling, maybe. If that feels okay on your neck and your back. If it doesn't, and you just need to stay here, that's fine. But we're reaching through that top arm to try to feel more sensation in the right side of the body. Put my headphone back in. All right. Taking a few breaths here in the side angle. So really trying to make a big side stretch. You're gonna take your left hand and the block with you. Inhale, lift yourself up. So you have to squeeze your legs together. Pivot the left toes in. You can wiggle walk the right toes out a little bit. And we're in this wide stance. If you need to come out and shake out your ankles, that's totally fine. We've been here for a little while and we're gonna be here a little longer. So if you need to move anything, you can. But we're gonna take that block or that water bottle, so it might be kind of on the highest setting like this, and send it out in front of us. And then start to send your butt back as you send the arms forward. Again, trying to be parallel to the ground until you can't be anymore. So then your hands just go straight down under your shoulders. From there, push the hands down, pull the chest forward, and bring a little bit of weight forward towards the toes. So I say that because a lot of times people are going to be like this, with their hips back behind their heels. It's a lot of stretch in your legs. We're actually looking for a little bit more stretch in our spine. So hips over heels, right in line with them. Pull the chest forward. So this is a forward fold. That does not mean it's a downward roll in, round in fold. So we're looking for a straighter spine, and then some length to go forward, which then helps us go down. So if you're feeling pretty comfortable, you might be able to take your block to the medium setting. You might be able to get your hands down to the ground. But keep thinking about pulling the chest forward, bringing a little weight forward towards the toes, and then letting the head relax. You might be able to walk your hands under your elbows a little bit more, walking them back. But what we don't want is this rounding in the back to happen. We're looking for a long spine for right now, for this one. And to be honest, my body's not really feeling that today. I might stay here. A lot of times I can fold deeper. Not today. I'm just really tight. So I'm going to stay here and keep thinking about lengthening through my neck and my back. Taking a couple more deep breaths. And then inhale, look forward. Take your hands forward if you walk them back. And then try, if you can, you might need to walk your feet in a little closer, and that's fine. Take your hands to your hips, squeeze the hands into the hips, and try to inhale and lift yourself up. If that doesn't work, you need to walk your feet in a little closer and then stand up, that's fine. And then all of us are just gonna wiggle walk our feet in a little closer and come back to Samasthiti at the front of the mat. Shake out your ankles if you need to. Sometimes I do a little roll through the foot, a little rolling it out. And then we'll find Samasthiti, equal standing pose at the front of the mat, pushing the feet down, standing up tall. From here, inhaling, Urdhva Hastasana. So that's the hands forward and then up. So palms are together. Listen, if your palms can't reach together, that's fine, or you just keep them where they can. And then exhale, fold forward. Inhale, halfway lift, lengthen. This time we're going to exhale, fold in, step one foot back, and then the other, coming into plank. Top of a push-up, Plankasana. Push through the toes, pull through the chest, lengthen through the crown of the head. And then exhale, set your knees down. And we're going to push back into an active child's pose. So for me, that means my toes stay tucked, my hands stay spread, and I'm pushing from my hands, my hips back toward my heels. I like that foot stretch. If you walk a lot, you're probably going to need that foot stretch. If it bothers you a whole lot or bothers your knees or something, and it would feel better to let the tops of the feet rest on the floor, that's fine. Getting a nice long stretch through the shoulder blades, letting your head relax toward the ground. And then everybody's going to start to push their feet down to send their hips up, coming into a downward facing dog. Deepen in the knees, heels off the ground. Downward facing dog's not working today, that's fine. Keep your knees on the ground. It's like knees over hips, and you can actually walk your hands more forward. So this is called puppy pose. But it's the same idea. Hands are pushing down, you're trying to stretch between your shoulders and your hips. It just means you don't have as much weight in your feet, and that's okay. From here, we're going to look forward, and we're just going to inhale and send ourselves back out into a plank. So hands under shoulders, toes under heels, push the feet down, pull the chest forward, pull the lower ribs and hips towards each other. And then exhale, set the knees down, push yourself back, active child's pose. If you need to walk your hands a little farther forward, you can. Either holding this for a few more breaths, or if you're really into it today and you want to pop up into downward facing dog, you can. Everybody meeting in downward facing dog or puppy pose, just to inhale and roll forward into plank. So plank can also be done with the knees down, but it's the same thing, pushing the toes down, pushing the hands down, pulling the chest forward, pulling the lower ribs and hips towards each other. Take another big inhale. And exhale, send the hips back, either an active child's pose or downward facing dog. And then exhale, set the knees down, everybody. And you can make it a more relaxed child's pose. So for me, that means my feet are starting to touch, the top of my feet touches the ground. I might widen my knees a bit. I might let my head find the ground, maybe. And listen, if it doesn't, you can always put something under your head, or I ask you guys to roll up some blankets or have a pillow, and you can make this a really restorative child's pose by putting some sort of prop under your body, under your torso, and just resting on it. For some people, that might mean another blanket or a pillow where the head part is, like right here. You might like that so that your nose could rest and you can rest your head straight on. Oh, my headphones are popping out. And then from here, start to sit up. And just move that blanket pile or bolsters or whatever you have off to the side. We're about to use it again. But you're gonna come to like, I don't know how to best describe this, but it's kind of like a mermaid pose. Like your legs are your mermaid tail. For me, my legs are just they're not perfectly stacked. They're kind of off to the side. This bothers you, especially when we start to get into it in a minute. And you just need to put a blanket or some sort of pillow or something between the knees to support the hips. That's fine. So you might want to have that nearby. But then you're going to grab your bolster or pillow or rolled up blanket. So for me, it's pretty thick. This one's about 4 inches. If it's softer, you might want to have about 6 inches or maybe more piled up. And it's going to go to the side of you, kind of like this. For right now, we're going to make this one longer right now. And then we're going to flip it in a second so that it's horizontal to us. So actually, nope, this is how we're going to do it. We might switch it up next week instead, but we're going to have it. So I have it, so the handle, which is in the middle of my bolster, is right at my hip bone. So you don't want it too far forward. You don't want it too far behind you. And whatever in the middle of whatever is here is right at your hip. And then you're going to take both hands to either side of that. And it doesn't really matter how wide it is. Don't stress out about that part. But we'll push our hands down and start to twist our chest toward, I'm going to call it the bolster, but you get to call it whatever prop you have. And then we'll start to fold toward it. I like to do that a couple times. I'm going to press myself up. I'm going to twist myself around, and I'm going to fall down a little bit. Do that a couple times. Twisting and falling. So you're trying to get your chest and your sternum toward it. If it can rest on it, you're trying to do that. And then it might feel good to turn your head away, or it might feel good to turn your head towards your knees. If you can't comfortably let your head rest down, then you might want to grab a blanket and just put it between your knees. Okay? Or, I mean, grab a blanket. If your head can't rest down, you're talking about the pillow up at the top. Forgot why I was grabbing the blanket. But you could do that with your knees too. So you might want to have some sort of something that makes this comfortable. We are looking for some sensation, but it doesn't have to be a ton of sensation. If you want more sensation, you can make it a little deeper. If you wanted more sensation, you can make this smaller. If you wanted less sensation, you could pump it up a little bit so that it's closer to you and not as close to the ground by putting a block there or another blanket or something like that under it. This is a fairly restorative twist, but we're still getting all the benefits of the twist. Digestive system's getting a little squeezed, internal organs, our spine is getting a little bit moved around, which can help the nervous system sort of ignite and check on the body. To help build endorphins. So now if you really, really like this, and you want to ignore me, you can. So if you're like, oh, this is it. Or if you even want to come back to this place for Shavasana later, we can do that too. But we're going to change the bolster a little bit. So we're in this twist. And you can stay there while I talk if you'd like. And we'll eventually come out of that by very, very slowly pushing our hands down and sitting up. If you want to stay there while I talk, that's fine. What we're going to do then is take that bolster or blanket roll, whatever you have, and make it horizontal to you. So horizontal to the front of the mat. And you may have to scoot it in a little closer. So we're going to take this left side of the body, or the side of the body that the knees are not on. So for me, it's my left side, this side. And we'll walk that arm out so that that bolster roll is going through your rib cage. For me, this might be a little too close to my armpit. I'm going to decide. You might want it a little closer to your hip. That feels better for me. And so what we're looking for is this sort of gentle opening on the right side. My hands could hold up my head, or I could let my head rest down, or I could put a block or something under my head. And then the top arm has two options. It could, or has lots of options. The two we're going to talk about. The right arm could go overhead, like such. Or it could go up. You're going to turn your thumb to face away or face towards your hip, away from your head. And the arm can come back behind you, just letting the elbow bend. Or it's here, or it's on your body, or it's somewhere that feels comfortable. Those are two different stretches you can give yourself. You can give yourself this stretch in the side body, in the right side, or the side that's not on the pillow. Or you can give yourself this opening in the front of the shoulder by taking the arm back behind you. And then just take a couple deep breaths there. So what we're trying to do is open up the side body, effectively opening up the lungs, the rib cage, the space where you breathe, so that you can breathe more fully. And then maybe find a little bit more space in other shapes and other movements. But then also, of course, breathing more fully is very important right now. We want to have some good lungs. But this also activates some lymph nodes in the torso that can help really boost your immune system. But really, really gently. It's really important to never really overstimulate lymph nodes. We just want to really gently do that so that they're kind of turned on and ready to help fight any viruses off. That's important if you have an autoimmune disorder like a MS or something like that, then maybe you do this super gently. So maybe if you're feeling a huge stretch on the side, you just take your arm down so that it becomes a little bit more gentle. For me, I like the neck part. I like letting my neck hang because then it's just a nice stretch, but you might not like that, and that's okay. If you want to make this more intense, you're like, this is not, I don't really feel anything. The trick to that would be to make this higher and more narrow. So you could do it by putting a blanket on top of a block, or you just have a more narrow blanket. And then you're just pinpointing one part in your rib cage to push into and one part to open up. This is a really good one for if somebody is a breast cancer survivor or dealing with that. You don't want to make those sort of movements in that area in the chest and rib cage to be very big. This could be a really great way to sort of target some of that scar tissue that might be created. And do an opening in a really, really gentle way. So you can make that space, just like if it's too intense, if it wasn't intense enough and you wanted to make it smaller, you make it more intense, you make the shape smaller. You make the thing that holds you up a little bit more narrow. The alternative is making it wider and lower if you needed to make it more gentle. Sometimes this is just a little too intense for me, right? That's pretty intense pressure on my rib cage on this side. So we're going to hold this couple more breaths, allowing that space to open up in the ribs and sideways. And the way we're going to come out of this is actually to make this into a back bend. So if you had decided to make it more intense, you might have to make it a little less intense for the next part. Otherwise, you should be able to use the same bolster or blanket roll if you used that earlier. You might need something behind you. So like, let's say if you were using your blanket or a block, let me use this block as an example. You might just want to have that nearby to grab onto, or if you were using it to rest your head on already, it could just move with you. But we're going to come out of this by rolling over onto our back. So just make sure you have enough space behind you, and you might need to adjust yourself a little bit so that the blanket roll is really supporting the spine. And we're coming into a back bend. Our head can come back toward the ground. Your head might find the ground. Mine's not at all. So instead of having my neck be stressed out, I'm going to put a block under my head. You could also use a blanket, another pillow, whatever you'd like. My arms are now currently, my fingers are reaching toward my heels. My knees are bent, notice that. You don't have to keep them that way. But I might, and my headphones are totally gonna fall out when I do this, but I might take my arms up overhead to accentuate the stretch in my rib cage. For me, that's where I feel it. I feel it a lot in the top of my rib cage. And then I might even extend my legs out because my low back doesn't feel this at all right now. If your low back is bothering you, it might be better for you to either keep the knees bent or to maybe scoot yourself forward a little bit so that the back bend isn't so big in the low back. You might even prefer to keep your hips up on something like a blanket or a block. For me, that's not where I feel it. I feel it in the front of my chest and rib cage. Again, it's kind of the same thing. You want to make it less intense. This becomes wider and more narrow or more low. You want to make it more intense. This becomes more narrow and maybe even higher. A block, or like a blanket that's rolled up real tight. This for me was just enough. It's like the bottom of the bolster blanket rolls in my rib cage, and I'm stretching out. I notice I'm giving you some time in these shapes because you are either going to try to find something that feels really good to you, and that might take some time, or you found something and now you get to rest in it for a while. So these are more yin-like shapes. So in the yin tradition, we're more focused on fascia, connective tissues, interstitial tissues, not so much muscles, not so much bones, but the things that connect that. And those, because they're more viscoelastic, they sort of take a little while to stretch out, and then they'll stretch back into their original positions, or they'll go back to the original positions we come out. So if you can find a shape that you like, the sensation doesn't seem to really change your breath, but you do notice it, then you can stay there a little longer and really allow these sensations to be in your fascia, your interstitial tissues. Those tissues are what helps us hydrate muscle and bones, get nutrients to muscle and bones. And so the more optimally they can function, often the more optimal our muscle and bones function. For me, especially, and for a lot of people, a lot of the tension in my body isn't held in my muscles, it's held in my fascia. So that's one of the ways that I know I hold a lot of tension in my rib cage. That's almost all fascia through there. And there's so much tension for me whenever I start releasing this or opening this. I always feel like this whole body release, almost always. You might not feel that, so don't expect it or don't be looking for it necessarily. I'm just telling you what my experience is and why this is one of the things I teach. But it's important to sort of change what we're activating. So in the beginning of class, we activated a lot of muscles. We were moving our arms, we were moving faster, we were doing bigger stretches that really got more into the muscles and the fascia, which is good. You can help those muscles function a little bit better, but then this is also needed. And so to come out of this shape, what we're going to do is take our hands behind our head. We're going to pull our chin in towards our chest, bring my hands down, and then sit myself up. Sitting up nice and tall. And resist the urge to fold forward. Just notice how your spine feels when you sit up. And then we're going to switch sides. So you can either bring your bolster to in front of you, or you can switch so that your right, mine's going to be my right side, but the opposite side is to the bolster or blanket. We have to do our twist first. So the bolster or blanket roll or whatever you have is going to be vertical. And then I like to get that up right against my hip or right close to my hip. Hands to either side of it. Again, your legs are comfortable, and this is a different side, so you may need to set them up slightly differently. Twist toward the bolster and then roll down. And do that a couple times, giving yourself a little twist and roll. So you're really trying to get your chest to face your prop, and then eventually you can just rest into it. Ooh, this side's tighter for me. So maybe you didn't feel a lot on that other side, and you're like, I didn't really get it. And then suddenly you're on a totally different side, and you're having completely different sensations. That's okay, and it's kind of expected for a lot of us, because most of us have an asymmetry in the body. And then from here, we just rest our head. Maybe you need to prop the head with something. Maybe the head faces towards the knees. Maybe it faces away. I like to give the bolster a little hug. Some people prefer their arms out wide. You're just gonna let your arms be comfortable so that you can release into this bolster a little bit. So this is actually more of a restorative shape. And in restorative yoga, we're actually trying to prop up the body, because the body recognizes that when it's propped, that means that it's safe, and the nervous system can go from fight or flight to rest and digest. The irony is these shapes I've kind of made, I've chosen a couple of shapes that, although we are restoring, we are resting into these shapes, they are energy building shapes. So twist and back bend build up energy, but it should be in a way that feels like that energy is useful. So it's kind of the difference between drinking a cup of tea and drinking a cup of coffee. The coffee might give us that energy boost, that caffeine boost that we need, but it feels like we kind of have a crash later. So that could be very similar to like a really intense back bend or a really intense stretch in vinyasa. It can make you feel really good, but it's not always the most sustainable, or it might cause injury. These shapes have those same benefits, but they're a little bit more sustainable because we're not putting ourselves into dangerous places to get there. So whenever you're ready, and you can always stay there if you've loved it, you'll lift yourself up slowly, and you'll change the bolster so that it's horizontal. And then you'll get that close enough to you, and that might adjust, you may adjust that, so that you can walk your right arm out and start to round over that bolster or pillows or whatever you have. My right hand might rest under my head. My left arm might come up and over or back behind. I'm a back behinder, so thumb goes towards my body. I bring the arm down and I just let it fold, because I then like to let my head release, and I get a bigger stretch in the side of my neck and shoulders this way. That's just how I prefer it, but I know a lot of people that prefer the arm up and over instead. I also often use a prop so that my muscles can totally relax. Taking a few deep breaths here. So again, you could adjust this if you were like, I want more sensation. You can come out. You can make this, whatever this prop is, more narrow and more and higher if you wanted it that way. If you're like, oh, that's so intense for me, I really don't even feel like I can breathe comfortably, then grab like a smaller pillow or maybe just one or two blankets piled up so that it becomes a wider base, but more shallow, like a wider and more shallow base. That's especially true if I have anybody who has had any sort of chest surgery. That can also be true for people who've had like an open heart surgery. The space is also very vulnerable. To help prevent scar tissue, you should stretch it a little bit and move, but you don't want to make it very intense. If you're like me, you hold a lot of tension in your sides, you're in your rib cage, you might be wanting more, but just know it can be kind of intense if you add a little bit more height or make it a little bit more narrow. We're going to hold this a few more breaths so that you can find something that feels good to you and stay there for a moment. And then as you're ready, what you'll do is you'll start to make your way back onto your back. Again, if you chose something higher and more intense, you might need to switch back to something slightly less intense. So you'll roll over onto your side. I like to keep the knees bent, so then you'll roll over onto your back. The head can hang. The arms can come up, the arms can come down, the arms can come out, depending on where this is. If you want a little bit more in your low back, you might scoot down so that the hips are on the ground, but this bolster really supports that low back. Ooh, that feels good to me today. And you can put something under your head so it doesn't just hang. It could be another blanket, a pillow, whatever. Arms, legs can be straight, they could be bent. If you had the blanket roll and you were like, so for me, I love having my upper back supported and opened, you could switch your blanket roll so it's back to that vertical position, the longer position. And the blanket roll or bolster goes, the end of it goes in your back rib cage, your lower back rib cage, not your low back, a little higher than that. So then your head has something to rest onto. This is more about your upper back this way. I often take my arms up and just let them rest on the bolster. Maybe even grab Today's class is mostly about spine and the shoulders. We've done a lot of work there. Make sure you're going to drink a lot of water after class because we have activated that fascia, stretched it. And it's almost like we've taken a sponge, wrung it out, and then you don't want that sponge to stay dry, at least not in your body. You want to wring out the sponge so that it can soak up more water. If you're like, oh, I'm really over these back bends, don't like it, don't care for it, you'll just end up sitting up, staying for a moment, and then laying back on your back. We'll all get there eventually, but I'm just telling you that if you're like, I hate this and I don't want to stay here, you don't have to. There's no need for you to. It's all about you learning what you like, what you don't like, and trying to find something that does feel good to you. We're all going to take about 3 to 5 more breaths, depending on how long your breath is. And then again, you're going to take your hands behind your head. You use your hands to pull your chin in towards your chest so that you're not leading with the neck as you start to sit up. If you need to roll off to a side and push yourself up, fine too. And then we'll remove the blanket roll, at least off to the side. You're welcome to use it in a slightly different way if you'd like to. And then we'll lay down onto our backs. Just keep your feet on the floor, knees up towards the ceiling to begin. And just take a few moments with your spine flat on the ground to see how it feels. It's not going to be perfectly flat for most of us. Somebody's back is, but just in a neutral position. It's kind of being forced to be flat. So if you're doing that and you're like, this doesn't feel good, I don't like being flat on the ground like this, we have a couple options. First, you might want to put something under your knees. Just put the bolster, the blanket roll under your knees or thighs. So it keeps them bent, which keeps your low back from sort of poofing up. It might keep it relaxed a little bit. Maybe you feel like a lot of tension in your shoulders or upper back. You could go into just goalpost arms, so your arms, back of your hands flat on the floor, or it might feel good to put a blanket or something under the head, or even a rounded up blanket to support the curve of the neck. Let's just say that you've been doing this class, and I've been doing Shavasana laying down the whole time this time, but you hate it. Like, it doesn't feel good to you. You don't feel good when you come out. You don't have to lay down for Shavasana. You can find a chair or a couch to sit up in. You can sit against something. Or my favorite thing to do, if you have the props, if you have a way to do it, is to get yourself a little propped up station. So I'm going to make mine it's not very big, but if you have multiple blocks, you can use multiple blocks. If you just have one block, or even like a blanket roll and then another blanket roll horizontal, so they make a T. See, I have this slight incline. Just get your hips up against that and rest back. And that might feel really good for you. For a lot of people, this might feel better. In the studio or in classrooms, we often do it even higher. So your feet can be back behind you. So if you had a blanket roll or something, you could put it up against the chair or the wall. That might help you. But you could sit up. It's almost just like you're more, I'll show you and just use my abs to sort of sit up inclined. So basically, you're trying to get yourself into a physically comfortable place. If that means sitting up, that's fine. If that means laying on your belly, that's fine. Whatever feels best to you, so that you can turn off your senses a little bit. Your body knows that, at least in this moment and in this space right now, it is safe enough to relax. Release. Or at least you're trying to allow it to learn that. And then once the body releases, the breath can become involuntary. The mind can become involuntary. And you can just be. This is when the nervous system takes over and it begins to repair the body, replenish the body, restore the body. And so one thing with the mind becoming involuntary, sort of with the breath becoming involuntary, doesn't mean it just stops. We would never want that to happen. That's not good. It just means we stop letting it have so much control over us and us have so much control over it. So the mind just is, it just does what it does, and you can observe that. And depending on you and how you are feeling today and what is going on in your life today, there's a couple different ways we always react, humans in general react to this. There's a lot of us who come to yoga or meditation or self-care practices to quote unquote escape. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes we need a break from what's going on. And so we could try to do that by putting our mind to something else, the breath, the movement, just trying to make our bodies feel good. In the yogic practice and the yogic teachings that I base my practice on, we are not trying to escape. We are not trying to ignore or set aside. In my practices and in my teachings, the teachings that I follow, we use the yogic practice, we use this time to become more aware of who we are, become more aware of who others are, become more aware of the reality of the world around us, not so that we can get stuck in it, or not so that it can necessarily affect our day-to-day life, but so that we can become more effective change makers, more effective humans, kinder humans, more compassionate humans, humans that are more aware of how others live, humans that are more aware of how we react to things. So these times are really just times to practice all of those tools that we can use outside of class. And every time you step onto the mat, or every time you do some sort of practice, it's really important to set those intentions in the beginning of class, and they may change. They may change as you move and go. Just to remind yourself, what are you looking for in that time, in that space, in that period? And it can change day to day. And I'd be lying if I said some days I come to my mat or I come to a teacher's class to escape. I'd be lying if I said I never did that, because it's really important to have to do that sometimes. But if that's all you ever do, then you're missing a really important and life-changing, transformative part of yoga. And so we've been sitting here quietly resting for a while. I would encourage you throughout the week, if you can, to try to find 12 minutes. It can be after exercise, it can be any time that you can find 12 minutes to sit quietly and rest. And just rest. Don't sleep, don't do an activity, just sit, just be. Could be laying down just like this in Shavasana. And just notice what happens if you do that on a regular basis. So 12 minutes is what modern scientists, Western scientists have really studied to show is one of the most optimal lengths of Shavasana, most optimal lengths of rest for us, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. So if you want to stay a few more minutes, you can ignore me. If you want to start taking this practice into your daily life, then I suggest trying to find 12 minutes to just be. You don't have to meditate, you don't have to do anything, you just have to be. And for those of you who are ready to come out of Shavasana today and in this class, in this moment, you can start to bring movement back to the body. Start to deepen the breath. start to make that movement a little bit bigger. Eventually, maybe giving yourself a big morning stretch or pulling the knees in towards the chest or some sort of movement that feels good while you're still laying down. And then, of course, being careful of any props you might be on, rolling off to a side or sitting up. Eventually, everyone making their way to a seated place. Again, if you're choosing to stay in Shavasana, you just ignore me or close the computer, and that's fine. Closing the eyes if that feels comfortable to you, or allowing your gaze to soften toward the ground. Bringing your hands to your heart center in Anjali Mudra, this slight space between the palms. So a mudra is just a placement of the hands that is thought to have a certain energy or a certain meaning. And this mudra, the heart mudra, is the space between the palms is really where we can send and imagine sort of holding gratitude. Gratitude towards ourselves for spending this time with ourselves. Gratitude towards your classmates for sharing their energy with you, their space and their time. Gratitude towards the cultures and the teachers from which these practices came. As I thank each of you for sharing your practice with me. Feeling the palms together feels the practice, feels in that gratitude. Dhanyavad, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.